Hello, and welcome to the Dance Physio Podcast, a podcast designed to explore ideas and foster discussion around dancer health and wellness. We're here to challenge the status quo, bridge the gap between dance science and the studio, and help change the landscape of the dance industry for the better. I'm your host, Erica Mayall, a dancer turned physiotherapist who is deeply passionate about leaving the dance world better than I found it. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dance Physio Podcast. I am your host, Erica Mayall, and today I am here with Bri Zborowski, and I'm super excited to chat with her today. So Bri was born and raised in suburban Detroit and discovered her love for dance at a young age, receiving well-rounded training in singing and dancing, as well as dance education and choreography. Growing up in an entrepreneurial family instilled in her the values of hard work and perseverance. After earning a BA in business management from Oakland University, she danced professionally in Los Angeles before channeling her entrepreneurial spirit into directing and developing competitive dance programs in Michigan, California, and Texas, all of which continue to thrive today. Now, one of the co-founders and CEO of Apolla Performance Wear, which was seen on ABC Shark Tank in season 13, episode 18. If you haven't seen it, check it out. She's also a founding member of Dansmedica and co-host of the Beyond the Steps podcast. Bri lives in Boise, Idaho, where she balances her role as a wife, a businesswoman, and a mother to her two children, Jackson and Lola, who are her greatest accomplishments and joy. So welcome to the podcast, Bri. I'm super excited to chat with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here.
Amazing. So I always start out with guest episodes of kind of asking people what their earliest memories of dance are, or kind of how you got into dance, or what the beginning of your dance journey looked like.
Yeah, it's funny. I think my mom put me into dance when I was 5 and started at a recreational, and obviously I don't remember this, but I'm repeating stories that I've been told, but I started at a rec center, just taking basic ballet, jazz, tap, and hated it. Like, I was the kid that cried, didn't want to go in. They had to pull me out early. Like, I was done. They gave me a year. And then they put me into a studio at 7 years old, and I fell in love. Like, I mean, when I say I fell in love, I mean, I said, this is going to be in my life forever. At 7, I remember, like, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life. And I still remember it was a ballet jazz tap combo. I remember my first ballet costume. I had a jazz dance, a recital dance where it was Surf and Safari by the Beach Boys. And I jumped out from behind a surfboard, and I loved tap. I mean, I loved all of it. And I just remember watching the big girls going like, I can't wait to do that. I can't wait to be there. I mean, it's all I wanted to do. And just that started the whole journey.
That's amazing. And do you think, like, going from sort of hating it to loving it, do you think that had more to do with the environment that you were in, like with the studio, creating a culture that made you fall in love with it? Or was it maybe more just like you were slightly older, more mature? Who knows?
Yeah, I do. I think it's that. I think I just, I don't know that I was ready for it. And just being a director and a teacher and a coach for so many years. I mean, I did that for 25 years of my career. And, I just think that's a really hard. 5 is a borderline age, right? Like, some kids are really ready at 5, but I think 7 or 8 is when if they're gonna stay in it or not stay in it, and I think I was just ready, and I think that happens with a lot of kids.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good point, because you're totally right. We see that a lot where, it's maybe the parents who are more interested in it in some of those younger kids. But once the kid decides for themselves that, like, this is what I truly want, there's often no stopping them, even if the parents are maybe slightly more reluctant. We get these kids who dive into huge amounts of training hours and stuff. And the parents, like, I can't convince them to not take this many classes.
And I think, like, in my situation, and I think this is common for so many people, my parents look at me and they're, where did you come from? Because no one in my family danced or performed. That was not a thing that anyone did. I was the first, the girl, the grandchild in the family, the oldest girl. And so the oldest child in my family. And so everybody's looking at me going, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I was dancing everywhere through the grocery store. We would put on shows in our backyard and charge our neighbors to come and watch us. And it was just innate, like that I spent my time in, in our house. Like we had a big stereo system. We had a record player, which I went through all my parents' old records and would put everything, cassette tapes and records, and just sit there and choreograph for hours and hours and hours. And nobody really knew. So I think parents, it's just another testament of parents do the best they can for their kids. But my mom and dad only knew what they knew. They were trying to give me the opportunities and saw that I loved it, but they didn't know what they were doing, So you rely really on that village that you're building with the studio that you send your kids to, and, hope that you're in a good place. And thankfully I was. So
yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. Like that rings true, I think, to a lot of people's journeys in the dance world. So I'm curious, because back then there was maybe not as visible or obvious a path towards like a career in dance, and whether that was like dancing professionally or even teaching and things like that. I'm not sure that it was so visible without, we now have social media, we have so much access to the internet. And so young dancers can explore all of these kind of career options or career pathways. But when you were growing up, that was probably less obvious. So did you always sort of know that that was going to be the career path you took in some capacity? Or
yes.
Was it like, maybe you didn't even know that was an option?
No, I mean, I knew I was, and that's my personality. Like once I wrap my head around something, like I'm like a dog with a bone. You can't, I've been like that since I was little, and I'm still like that today. Like once I get something in my head, you can't get it out of my head. And so for me, I mean, it was just a statement, like, this is what I'm going to do. So I fell in love with it, but I grew up, I mean, and I wasn't allowed to watch it for so long, but that MTV era where MTV was videos and artists. And I mean, I was just fascinated like by Paula Abdul and Janet Jackson. Like they were my, icons of life. Like, I mean, anything they did, I was like paying attention, and just I'm fascinated by the commercial aspect of it, especially from, and just loving Broadway, and couldn't get enough of musicals. And thankfully I had a family that nurtured that and took me to see shows. And I got so many opportunities to see Broadway musicals that come, through Detroit, has some amazing theaters. And so, it was fostered in so many different ways. And that inspiration was everywhere because I was always looking for it. I had friends that loved dancing. And so we would make up dances and shows together. So yeah, but very different than now. I feel like it's so accessible and almost to the point where you make it look easier than it is to have a career in dance. And I think the lesson that I've learned now in adulthood is that there's so many ways to be involved with dance. And what I hope young people out there realize is even if you're not the professional on stage, there's so many ways that you can still be involved in shaping the industry and have your hands in it and be around the creative side of it and feel fulfilled, even if you're not on that stage, right? There's wonderful things that you can do if you just think outside the box a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And like both of us are sort of testament to that, where we're still like absolutely involved in the dance industry, but neither one of us, I assume you're not still dancing professionally.
No, there's no time for that. No.
Exactly.
No, that part of my life. I feel good. I feel good about what I did with it and the path I took to get where I'm at. I think it all led me to the place that, that I'm in now. And, God, I was able to meet my husband and my best friend who I'm now in business with. And it just shaped so much of my life. So I'm incredibly grateful for the path that I was able to take.
Yeah, absolutely. So I find it really interesting that you did go on and do a BA in, what was it? It was in business management, I believe.
Yeah.
And so can you tell me a little bit just about like how that came about, if you were obviously following this path of like, professional dance and like being in the dance world, where that sort of business side, I know definitely from your family's influence, but was it always sort of like, okay, I know I'm going to need a career after my dance career? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, I think when I first fell in love with dance, I when I was young and I wasn't thinking with logic. I was just thinking about with passion and heart. I was, I'm going to major in dance. I grew up in a family where my dad didn't go to college. He's very, very much a self-made man. My mom went to business school, but had me, they were high school sweethearts. She had me when she was 20, and sort of she stayed at home and put her career on hold to raise us, and then went back to work, later in the family business. And so college was something that was really important to both of my parents. That was something that we grew up. It wasn't a question on if you're going, you are going. And, I think there was a lot of conversations in our house. Like they raised us to be very conversational, and they wanted to hear what we had to say and our opinions. And, but they also were very involved in our decision-making processes. And so after a lot of conversation about it, it was, okay, do we need to major in dance? What am I going to do with dance? Understanding how the industry works a little bit more. I don't know that I need to do this, but I do know that at some point, I want security. I want stability. I want to know that if something happened to me tomorrow and I couldn't dance, that I could support myself and, all of that. And I think just growing up in the family business and being part of that since I was very young, and that being such a big part of our life, business was a no-brainer for me. Like, because you can go at so many directions with that degree, that I wanted to be able to understand the mechanics of the business. I was getting the real world side from my parents and seeing it built, in real time and going from nothing to, a $50 million company. But on paper, understanding that means something to people out in the world, I knew I wanted to have that. So that's what I did.
Yeah, and it's obviously served you very well because you are now the CEO and one of the founders of Apolla. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of how that came about? Because I imagine you did not sort of just one day wake up and say, I'm going to start a sock company. So obviously
Absolutely not.
There was a connection within the dance world. And can you just, I know a little bit about the story, but just for the listeners who maybe aren't familiar with the story of the company or with you, can you just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So I met my best friend of 20 years now. She was actually best friends with my husband through they danced together in Idaho. And her mom ran a dance camp. She was a studio brat. Her name's Kaycee. Shout out to Kaycee Jones. But she and I connected when I met my husband and just hit it off, to the point where she's like, okay, push my husband. She's like, you're out of the way. It's she and I now. So we just hit it off and kind of lived the next phase of our lives all over the place. She moved to Pennsylvania, then New York, then Atlanta, and now Florida. And we moved from LA to Texas, then Michigan, and now to Idaho, back to where they were from. And, when we were in Texas, I was running a competitive company, and my husband and I had been married for a couple years and starting to talk about having a family. And I was brought into this particular environment to sort of take a studio from the red and put it into the black. And I mean, I got to pour my passion for dance and my passion for business into really building this program the way that I had always dreamed about building a program, and had the freedom to be able to do that. And everything was going great. It was extremely successful. Within a year, we were in the black. It was amazing. And then we started, we had our first baby. And I think for me, that was the first time in my life that I was like, I don't know that I want to do this anymore. I don't know that I can do this, because I was pouring myself into this job and the studio and other people's children that weren't mine. And then I had people raising my baby, because I was gone so much. I was, when you're a competition director, studio owner, whatever, I mean, your life is that program, right?
Absolutely.
And so it just, something shifted in me. And my husband was traveling a lot. He was a convention director. And I was just at this really transitional moment. I didn't know what I wanted. I had opportunities to open my own studio leading up to that, and something didn't feel right about it. I had, it actually happened 2 or 3 times. And I said, no. And my best friend, we were actually on vacation together. She was with her family. I was with mine. And we were on the beach. And she and her husband pitched me this idea about, we want to make something to mitigate the injuries that we're seeing in dance. We're thinking socks. We want you to I want you to come in on this with me. You're the only person I can think of to do it with. Let's do it. And it was the worst time. We both had 1-year-olds. We were, money's tight. You're doing the whole thing. You're doing that. I'm building my family. I'm growing my career. I had benefits. I had a salary. My husband, we had it figured out, but we were building our life. And, something in me was screaming, this is it. like do it. And it couldn't have been a messier time to do it. And I just got lit up inside at the thought of it, and first on so many levels. And from that moment on, it was just pedal to the metal, foot on the gas, and we put our heads down and we went to work. And 10 years later, we're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a cool story. So I know Kaycee's background is, I believe, in kinesiology.
Yeah.
And so was that maybe her influence in like how they kind of came to the idea of socks, when it's like, okay, what can we do to, like, obviously people are aware of like the injury issues and the injury kind of like epidemic in dance, but in terms of like trying to come up with a solution or something, like, was there something particular that made her think, okay, socks is it?
So it's so funny because I believe in every really great partnership, you have to have people on both sides of the spectrum, right? Like she's a lifelong student, has been the entire time I've known her. And before that, like just, she's the person that's always learning, and she's always educating herself. If she doesn't have anything to do, she's like listening to a webinar, a podcast, a this, a that, learning a new skill, understanding. Her brain just wants to understand everything. And she got her master's in kinesiology, is very research driven, science driven, and did her master's thesis on actually the compression in the foot and all of the things. And and then there's me, who's living this real world boots on the ground situation. I've got real life, pre-professional competitive program. I'm working with kids every day. I'm seeing these injuries happening in real life. I'm seeing the trends that are going on with barefoot dancing, with people in socks. And I'm kind of validating everything that she's thinking and seeing from the research standpoint, plus her own experience, right, as a dancer, and the injuries and the chronic pain that she's dealing with now in her, 30s and 40s. And it just made sense to us. We're like, but at the same time, we recognized this was going to be a huge undertaking in terms of education. Like, this is a conversation that was not being had in the commercial space until Apolla came along. Like, we started a lot of really important conversations in regards to the commercial competitive space, especially for kids, which we're really proud of. And it was not an easy road. It was something that it would have been, I think, fairly easy for us to go and talk to the parents and get them to buy for their kids and all of the things. But we knew we wanted lasting change. And so we really took a top-down approach with the way that we did this. And we were in R&D for about a year and a half, close to almost 2 years before we went to market, because we knew there were really big players in the space that had been in the space for a really long time. Footwear giants that have been making, have lots of money and the ability to, maneuver things whatever way they wanted to. And we knew that we had one chance to really be released in a big way to make an impact, and for this to be something that was legitimately ours and impactful on the industry. And so we took our time, we did it right. And once we knew we had something magical, that's when we took it to market. We were both pregnant with our second kids a month apart. And we went to live sales while I had just had my second, and she was pregnant with her second the day we went to live sales. So it was a really crazy time, and the reception was incredible. But dance is a really unique space because it's, they evolve in their art. Dancers evolve in their art all the time, and that's expected and it's understood, and it's encouraged to be creative and expand outward and all of the things. But the rigidity when it comes to tradition and the things that we are expected to do as dancers or tolerate as dancers is really slow to evolve, if it evolves at all, right? So it's this really interesting dichotomy, and we tackled that head on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right that I think the biggest barrier that a lot of us who work in the health and wellness space within the dance industry face is that idea of tradition, and really just trying to dispel some of those myths. And I think we're seeing it more with the younger generation of dancers. I see so much more willingness and just desire to challenge some of the status quos. And so I do think we're going to start to see like much more rapid change in the coming years. And I think we're already seeing sort of the tip of the iceberg, but absolutely like over the past, 5, 10, 20 years, that has been the absolute biggest barrier to making any sort of meaningful change is this like idea of preserving tradition, which I also find so interesting because so much of what we're trying to preserve is actually like so problemagic and so toxic. And so you're like, why are we trying to preserve this?
And we have these conversations all the time where we'll look at people, they'll legitimately say these things they believe in so much and they have to do this. And serious question, like why? Tell me why. Who made that rule? Some guy 50 years ago, 100 years ago that said this is a ballet shoe and we have to wear this. Why? Like, what is it doing for you? It's doing absolutely nothing for you. Why are we wearing pink tights? I don't know. It looks good. Like, there's just so many questions where you ask why and nobody really knows how to answer it other than, well, that's how I learned.
It's always been
that's how it's always been. And we need to challenge that because if you're looking at anything else in life, anything else in society, politics, religion, whatever, the question, like if everything stayed the same as when it was, right? We would be in a really scary place or a really different place than we are as a society. And like the only time things evolve and become better is when people question it. And so dance is one of those things where it doesn't have a governing body. It doesn't have a standardization of any sort. There's no education required to be a studio owner or a dance teacher or whatever. And you have a lot of people, pretty much everybody who is growing up and learning, and then they become the instructor and then they teach what they were taught and all the things. Well, at some point, all of what they were taught became outdated. And there's way new information that we have. There have been more studies. There's been more research. There's more products on the market that are available that actually solve problems and eliminate pain points. And we have to look at those things like we do with everything else in our life to really create meaningful, lasting change and to be healthier, happier human beings. And dance has just been really slow to adopt that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Process.
Yeah, for sure. So for the listeners who are not familiar with the product itself, I know we've kind of talked around the edges of it, socks and all of that, but can you just tell us a little bit about specifically what the Apolla socks are and like why they are unique and sort of how they are actually sort of changing the game in the dance space a little bit?
Yeah. So broad overview, we are absolutely a compression sock. We use premium targeted compression. It's all patented the way they're knit together, but the support zones create lift and stabilization in the arches. They create knit and energy absorption padding in the heels and balls of the feet, proven to reduce force of impact with every step and jump. We actually, because we're a company based in research, we've done 3 independent studies so far that show that they reduce force of impact better than any sock or a shoe, dance shoe. And they're all approved by the American Podiatric Medical Association. But what dance is the repetitive nature of movement of dancers. You're doing the same movement day in, day out in rehearsals, in class, and whatever. That overuse, a lot of times we're dancing more hours than we should for our age. We see that a lot with kids who are dancing pretty much double, triple the amount of hours than what is recommended for their age. But that leads to pounding on the body and inflammation that causes aches, pain, swelling, and leads to the overuse injuries that we see in dance. We're removing that inflammation, making them less prone to injury. We're improving circulation, pushing blood up towards the heart so that their body recovers faster and heals faster. So they're fresh the next day. They're less fatigued. They're less prone to injury. We like to say that we're an injury risk management tool. We're not going to eliminate the problem, but we're absolutely an essential tool that you need to have in your toolkit. They're all approved by the American Podiatric Medical Association. They're antimicrobial, they're moisture wicking, sustainably made, 100% in the USA. And of course, we're all female owned lifelong dancers. So that's kind of a broad overview. But for us, when we were very intentional, when we were creating the product, we wanted a style to replace, we started with dancers. We wanted a style to replace every dance shoe there is. So there is something to replace the half sole, which does nothing for the foot. They shred, they're not durable, they're uncomfortable because they have that bulky, uncomfortable stitching on the pad of the foot. We have a style that replaces that, that's way more comfortable, durable, and actually supports the foot and ankle. We've got a style that replaces a jazz shoe. We've got, if you're a dancer that likes to dance in socks, we have something, your convention sock, your regular contemporary sock. We have a mid calf, a knee high for recovery. We've got a barefoot style that we developed with the principal dancers and the head of physical therapy for Boston Ballet at the time, Heather Southwick. They helped us develop our full compression leg warmer and our jewel style, which can be worn to give you support in ballet flats and point shoes, because those shoes have no support, right? And we're overstressing the arch in those point shoes. So there's something for everybody. And then along the way, what we figured out and testing is like, not only are we serving the dance community with these styles that were created specifically for dancers, but we're also helping people that have 75% of Americans have foot pain. So people that have plantar fasciitis, severs, hypermobility issues, fallen arches, high arches, old ankle injuries. I mean, you name it. We can help with that, right? And then people on their feet all day and travel and pregnancy. And so that's really been the exciting / challenging part is, okay, yeah, we developed this product that was made for dancers by dancers, but can help anyone with feet. Now we have to get it out there. And that's where I think Shark Tank was a pivotal moment for us as a company. Was it really put us onto that mass market sort of audience and platform that we needed for visibility to be able to get our products to everybody.
Yeah, amazing. And I love your point about having kind of a style to replace every sort of shoe or in every situation, because every dancer has preferences. And we see that a lot, and especially with dancers who have had foot or ankle injuries. And if they're rehabbing and coming back, that, some dancers like dancing in socks, some are in a ballet shoe, some dancers are in bare feet or whatever it is. But we often need to give them some extra support or protection, like especially from a rehab perspective. And sometimes we can accomplish that with tape, but taping has its limitations in the sense that a lot of people's skin does not tolerate being repetitively taped for the amount of time that dancers might need that extra support when they're returning back. And so to have a variety of products and styles that dancers can kind of like trial and play around with has been super beneficial from a clinical perspective, because we can find something that's giving them just that little bit of extra support. It's not, replacing any of the strengthening and rehabilitation that they're doing, but when they're returning, one of the biggest barriers for dancers getting back is like the confidence. Like they're kind of, do I trust this ankle? Is it going to support me? There's just like maybe a little bit of like a psychological barrier, and having that extra support can make a massive amount of difference. So although we absolutely like also recommend the product and often have dancers who are wearing them just like in class daily or as a recovery tool and things like that, from a rehab perspective, having all of those different styles available is super, super beneficial, because dancers have different preferences in terms of what they like.
And I want to touch on a couple things that you said. So the preferences was something that we as dancers, we have a really great perspective because we were literally in their shoes. Like we understand everything that they need, everything that they're going for or going through, the pain that they feel when they're older and out of it. And they don't have the visibility when they're young to know like this is going to hurt later, right? So we get all of that. So we took all of that in consideration, and that's part of why we have the variety of styles like you mentioned, because we know barefoot dancing isn't going to go away. Dancing in socks isn't going to go away. One of my favorite moments of our journey was when we got to do a course series with Mia Michaels, who said, I told people to take their shoes off, and I wish I would have had this, and I wish I would have known what I know now, and I wish this product was available then, and I would have known about it, right? So like that was a full circle moment for us. But the traction option of like there's literally no excuse why somebody couldn't have these, right? Like there's grip, there's no grip. So if you're dancing on carpet, you're wearing them in shoes, you get your non-grip. If you're wearing them in place of dance shoes, there's a refreshable grip that you can wear on a wood or marley surface that's not going to ruin the surface, you can refresh it to your preferred level of grip for the entire life of your socks. And these things last. They're going to outlast any dance shoe. No holes, no snags. Compression's guaranteed 6 to 9 months. I mean, it's like a no-brainer. But you mentioned taping. And these are absolutely replacing KT tape and bulky bracing. But the problem I have with KT tape, and we're seeing this a lot because we're expanding into cheer, where taping is so much a part of the routine. It's not, unless you've got a trainer that understands what they're doing with that KT tape, it's rendered useless most of the time because you've got parents putting this tape everywhere under this, like too much of it, not the right places, not taped at the right insertion points or places, targeted places on your feet and ankles. And so they don't know what they're doing. And so I had one mom tell me she was spending like $200 in a weekend just in KT tape to tape her cheerleader. And you're like, oh my gosh, like what do you, and it's probably not even being done well because it's not being done by a trainer or somebody that knows what they're doing. And so it's very interesting to me, the things that people will tell themselves as like, well, I do this, but that's not working. Right. So it's making sure that you're aware of what's going on. And, you mentioned rehab. That is definitely something I feel, especially in dance, is not thought about as much as it should be. I think dancers, we focus on dance is interesting because there's this focus on aesthetic, like everything has to look really good and it has to be on trend and it has to be fashionable. And like, there's that part of it. But then there's the tradition piece where people are like really stuck on like, but that's not what I'm not allowed to wear. But why? You know what I mean? I'm not allowed to put that on. I'm not allowed to dance in this. I can't do that. I need to do this. And you're like, but why? And so, but nobody ever brings up the recovery aspect. Like, what are you throwing on when you're done training? Where are you wearing to bed? What are you wearing to school? Like, what are you putting on in those off-peak hours? And that's very much what, our full coverage styles, the knee high, the mid calf, like the crew, even those styles can be worn in that way as well. So even when you're not dancing, we're going to continue pulling out that inflammation, improving the circulation. So your body is fresh the next day. And like, I see it with my son in soccer, like he's in competitive soccer and they have to wear shin guards and they have uniform socks that they have to wear, right? Because somebody paid to be a sponsor of the club and they are on the jerseys and they provide socks. Okay, fine. Well, he throws his Apollas on when he gets home. He's got a growth plate issue in one of his ankles that causes him a lot of swelling and tenderness and pain. He puts those socks on and he's good to go. The next day he wears them to bed and it's a knee high or a mid calf and he's good to go. So they work, and that's the thing, is like just getting people to understand and getting it to be acceptable to the coaches, the directors, who say it's okay to do this. And that was where we spent our time educating a lot of those people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a good tie-in to, so last week's podcast episode was all about footwear and dance as well, but more about like traditional dance shoes and some of the problems we see, whether it be character shoes or ballroom shoes or point shoes. And in a lot of genres of dance, you can't get away from those. We're not going to do point without a point shoe on. Like there are just realities, but we also know how problematic a lot of that footwear is for our feet. And so a lot of what we were talking about last week on the podcast had to do with, okay, what are we doing with the other 18 hours in the day when our feet aren't in these shoes that are maybe not optimal, or maybe not even 18 hours. Maybe if dancers are only dancing a couple of hours a day, maybe it's the other 22 hours in a day, whatever it is. What are we doing to take care of our feet in those instances? Because the reality is, although there are people who are trying to change the dance footwear game from other realms, like different ballet shoes and point shoe designs and things like that, the reality is that they're probably always going to be problematic. And so we have to think about what else we're doing. And that's where I think that this product, or the idea of like recovery tools for our feet, is so important, because we know that we're not, and dance isn't the only sport. We see it in like rock climbing and things like that as well, where like a rock climbing shoe by nature has to be stiff. It has to be tight and compressive. That's not ideal for the function of the foot. So what do we do when we take that shoe off, and how do we then focus on recovery and making sure the foot can still work optimally in all other situations? So
absolutely. I think people come up with interesting, arguments that, again, it's like they're recycling things they've heard of, like, Well, I'm not, we get this one not often, but we do get it. And it's every time we're just, laughing like, well, this is restricting my ability to build strength in no, it's not. Like, we're not preventing you from moving or doing anything. We're stabilizing, but we're not completely restricting you from moving. You can still have full range of movement. And again, as dancers, we understood how important that was for them to be able to have full range of motion. And we made sure that our products allowed that. But yeah, I mean, it's no matter what industry you're in, and that's what we're finding now is like, we can literally help everyone with feet. So from basketball to football, multi-sport athletes and, soccer players to figure skaters and like rugby team, like roller derby, like hikers, climbers, runners, like all of the things we can help so many people. And it's so different than what's out there in terms of the way that we place the compression. And it's just interesting to see people discovering that for the first time, but there really is something for every shoe. Like you mentioned, point shoes, ballet shoes, like, okay, throw on our Jewel, open toe, open heel, fits nicely in, camouflaged under the point shoe ribbons, and then throw on a recovery pair afterwards. Like, it's going to give you more support than that ballet or point shoe, but then what are you throwing on when you're done, right? So it's like a magical 1-2 punch of a support combination, and people love it. So we're excited. We're excited to be here 10 years later to look back and see the progress that's been made, but we're not done. I think that's what we realize is there's more work to do, and we're committed. We're going to stay in the trenches and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a good point that like there is so much more work to do. And a lot of that work comes from an educational standpoint in terms of just changing the perceptions within the dance world of, not necessarily falling back on tradition, or just when we have more information and newer research and newer understandings of things, like how do we get that information out to the dance community? And it's one of the things that we are aiming to do with the podcast is like kind of disseminate that information more to the dance world, because we know that there's lots of good research happening within the dance sort of health and wellness space, injury prevention, just all sorts of dance research happening. And we also have lots of knowledge that we have from the sports realm that maybe is not as commonplace in the dance world. And so it's just getting that information out. And I know that Apolla does such a good job of being advocates in that space and really trying to help spread the message to the wider community of like, okay, we can do things differently and things can be better than they maybe have been in the past.
Yeah, we try really hard. Thank you for that. And I think that's one interesting thing that people need to observe is like when you're looking at other sports who have these tools available to them and they've been developed for these athletes and they have things that they have to wear, there's a reason why. And you also have to look at there is an organizational body within that sport that is saying this is important, right? And dance, again, doesn't have that. So I encourage all of the parents out there that are watching, like, and I'm a parent of two young kids and that are doing different things. And, you get handed papers and you're just on autopilot and you're like, okay, I got to get this because they told me to. And back to the story about my parents, like you only know what you know as a parent, and you try really hard to do the best you can, but you're really relying on the people that are coaching or teaching your children to give you the information. And I think that's so important with dance parents, especially because there is no standardization in this industry for you to question, for you to do your own research, for you to find the tools, because I cannot tell you how many times we have sat at conferences, trade shows, and we have, like I told you, we did the top-down approach where we talked to the educators, the coaches. We gave free pairs out for them to just try them out for months to just understand, like, these feel amazing. And I cannot tell you how many times coaches and directors said, oh, I need these for me when I'm teaching. My feet hurt. We're like, yes, and we want you to put them on your students. And here's why, so they don't feel like this. Well, they don't need them. I need them. I'm in pain. And you're like, like we have so much more work to do because that is you're missing the point. Like we don't want them to feel like you do right now. Like you're standing in front of me telling me you're in so much pain that you can barely move and you haven't been able to put on dance shoes because your body hurts so bad and you need more support, but you feel bad that you can't move with them. You can't demonstrate with them. that's a problem. Like, we don't want that for them. We want them to grow up. When I'm looking at kids with ankle issues and knee issues and hip replacements at 16 years old, like, that should not be happening for kids that young. And so we really have to question and evaluate, what are we doing with our kids here? And if the studio director isn't going to do it, if the teacher is not going to do it, what can I do to make sure that I'm protecting my athlete at home? You know?
Absolutely. And that's also one of the really great things about the product too, is that it comes in so many different colors. And so I know like studios who are using it like just as part of their costuming. So especially in like contemporary and stuff, if you're having socks anyway, it's just as easy to be like, okay, these are the socks that go with the costume because of like the color schemes and things like that, or dancers for solos and things like that. Like,
you can dye them. We've seen
that too.
Like color matching of costumes. They'll buy the white ones, any of our white ones, and they'll dye them. And they look fantastic. You're just like, okay, well, this is great. And we're not done. We want to come out with more colors and more styles. And I think our nudes we were one of the first ones to do like a range of nudes like that and make that more accessible. And we still want to introduce more of that, but they're complementary. We're a small team, so we do things very intentionally and by demand and by what we're hearing from our customers. And so I think that, there's more to come from Apolla, but we're excited about the progress that we've made for sure.
Amazing. Well, it's been absolutely game changing in terms of like I said, like what we're seeing in the dance industry and just having another option for dancers that isn't a traditional dance shoe, but also isn't just like completely barefoot dancing or dancing in socks.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate all of the work that you guys have done in the space. I'm aware of the time and don't want to take up too much more of your time, but if you're willing, I always like to finish off guest podcast episodes with a couple of like rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
All right. First one, what is your favorite genre or style of dance?
Oh, I'm a jazz funk girl all the way. Like I mean, love it. I mean, I think when I graduated my senior year, I was like one step short of burning my point shoes. I'm like 5 foot tall on a really good day, like probably closer to 4'11", and do not have that traditional, ballet body by any stretch. And that was just always so challenging. So that was out the table for me. But got jazz funk, hip hop, tap. I loved all of those genres, but jazz funk is my favorite for sure.
Amazing. Would you rather be on stage or in the studio?
This is a hard one for me because I feel like I'm half and half. I feel like I love performing. I remember every time I used to have a performance, I would smell the stage. Like there's that smell when you get into a fresh theater. And, but I love also like being behind the scenes and orchestrating all of it too. I think it's that creative and business brain, that split that I have, but so 50-50 on that. Okay.
If you could dance with or share the stage with any dancer, past or present, who would it be and why?
Oh man, there's so three. I'm going to say true to my younger self and say Janet Jackson, hands down.
Okay, iconic.
I'd love to do it. Gene Kelly, iconic, but also like in the back of my head, Vera Ellen. So White Christmas, Vera Ellen. Like, yeah. I mean, I still it's one of my favorites. I love watching her. Like she's just magnetic and would just love to witness it in person for sure.
Amazing. What's one thing you would go back and tell your younger self as a dancer?
Don't think so much. Like I just, you're just so worried about what people think or what are you going to look like or, am I doing this right? Or, you get in your own head about, I'm not getting this step. I mean, it just don't overthink. Don't think so much.
All right. And finally, I feel like we've kind of touched on this a tiny bit maybe, but if there was one thing that you could change about the dance world, what would it be?
The resistance to change, for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. I think that's a great way to wrap things up. But just before I let you go, if listeners want to connect either with yourself personally or with the company, with Apolla, if people want to learn more information about the product or about the research that's gone into the product or things like that, where can people find you?
We are at Apolla, Apolla performance.com. We're at Apolla Performance on all social media platforms. So X, Insta, TikTok, Facebook. You can find us there. You can search us on YouTube, Apolla Performance. Give us a like or a follow. We're really responsive. You can message us, DM us, chat us, text us. You can email us info@apollaperformance.com. But you can reach us through all of those platforms.
Amazing. And I will link those in the show notes. So if anybody is listening and wants a direct link, that will be in the show notes and you can click from there. So I just want to say a massive, massive thank you for joining me today on the podcast. It was great to get to chat and get to know you a little bit better, but also to hear about sort of the product and how it is changing the landscape of the dance industry. So I really appreciate your time and I appreciate everybody tuning in and listening today. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.